Welcome, everybody. Capt Ron here with my favorite team, crew, whatever, Diane Hansen and Eric Larson. And missing, of course, is Dieter. He's down in Mexico catching some sun, and you might see him sneak in there in the site there and look for notes and things like that. So, but we're here. We're with his able spirit. And to give you another week's episode of Fearless Flight, this is where you go if you have a fear of flying, or if you know somebody who has a fear of flying, or if you just like to talk about the airlines and get some of the wisdom from Diane and Eric and those of us who've been flying for years. So anyway, tonight, let me share my screen and get the right one up there. Oh. Okay. Can you see the main slide?
Yes.
Good. Okay. Wow. I'm actually getting like I know how to do this there. So anyway, so here we are. Welcome. Fearless Flight Live. And first thing we'd like to mention is our Facebook group, private group, Fearless Flight Birds of a Feather, for anyone out there who has fear of flying. And it's very active. We're upwards of 1,500 members now. And be sure and join it if you're not already a member, and leave a note that you were there and get information or give it. We have a lot of great people that participate in that. Tonight's show, we're going to talk about Alaska Airlines, as if you probably didn't know that already. And we'll mention the graduation flight. We're launching that tonight. If you're on our list, you will get an invitation, no matter where you are. So if you should be in the Burbank area, we're going to have another flight coming up in next month, one of our famous graduation flights. I'm going to put out a word for the 201 live monthly group coaching, which is next Thursday, a week from this Thursday. And then, of course, as always, we take your questions and comments. So what the heck? We might as well get into it. So Diane, Eric, what do you guys think when you saw that in the news? What was it, Friday? I think it came out. Friday it happened. Yeah. And just any reactions that you guys had when you first?
The first thing, I thought it was a miracle that that everyone on the aircraft survived. Just by happenstance, no one was sitting in that row. It was just a miracle. It was just another one of those, oh my God, I can't believe everybody did okay. So that was my first reaction.
Yep.
I'm such a softie. I just thought, and I feel badly for everybody. I thought, oh, poor Boeing and poor Max. Max is the coyote in the Roadrunner cartoon. What now?
What else could go wrong? Go wrong.
Yeah. Well, you can bet that those folks that were on there will have a story to take with them for the rest of their lives, for sure. The crew undoubtedly will have some memories and some stories on that. And we'll talk a little bit. I'm going to touch on EMDR later on tonight, just because that's going to be the topic of our monthly coaching session, and probably relate to some of the people there, because probably some of them. It'd be interesting to hear what they did for the passengers after they landed. This is a big sore point for me. I got involved in a couple of air turnbacks where, one was a 757 that turned around. They had a overheat light, not a fire, but an overheat light. And of course, the crew handled it, turned it around and landed. And they were delayed about 3 hours till they got another airplane, and most of the passengers, because it was going from Phoenix to Baltimore, so there weren't any other flights that day, and they handled that. And we had 4 flight attendants on the 57s, and all 4 of them were off work for a while because of the trauma they went through. And one of them came to one of the classes about 6 months later, and because she was having some after effects. So we'll talk a little bit about that, and I think the session we have on next Thursday you're going to really love. Yeah, so I'll put a bug out there for that. So anyway, okay. So what happened, Eric? Why don't you just start out and give, for anybody who may have been living under a rock or in a phone booth and didn't know that this happened this week, what's the essence of what we know so far?
Well, in a nutshell, this is a -9 series of the Max, which will come back to a minute later. It's important to remember that. But the crew made a normal takeoff from Portland, and they had some repeated pressurization faults that had been cleared. And the pressurization controller, we call it the pressurization controller, consists of 2 automatic controllers and 1 standby. So the fault had been cleared, and Ron and I were guessing on the warm up. Probably there was some leaking going on in there with this door, messing with the pressurization that had previous to this flight not been detected. And as the airplane climbed through 14,000 feet, the emergency exit window and that whole plug door assembly blew off the airplane completely. So it looked like that, only it was louder, and miraculously and thankfully, nobody was sitting in that row, and nobody was hurt. And the flight crew handled it very, very well and returned to Portland within 20 minutes after takeoff and landed, minus this part for the airplane, which we'll get into in a minute about the significance of this part.
Yeah. And so the investigation is looking at that in detail and seeing what they can tell from that. And one, to find out what went wrong, and 2, make sure that nobody else is out there flying. So some of the things that you may have, first came up. I had a couple people, of course, write me and ask me, and the one I thought we'd talk about this one. Could the MAX 8 have the same issue? Because this person was planning to go to Hawaii, and she read that these airplanes were designed to go to Hawaii, so she was wondering about that. And the MAX 8, Eric, why don't they have to worry about the MAX 8?
The MAX 8 is a shorter fuselage and does not have this plug door installed. So this is number one, is a non-issue for the MAX 8, and number 2, that door was put there should they start utilizing, for some reason, the owner, a very high seat density arrangement where the emergency exit would be required there, and it could be installed there. But until then, it's just a plug in a hole where the emergency exit could be installed, and that does not exist at all on the MAX 8 fuselage.
Yeah. Nor does it. I don't know of it ever existing on any other airplane. I've never heard of such a thing, having a plug.
Nothing I've had experience with. No.
Yeah. And I should have probably gotten a picture of the other side, or another one that hasn't blown out, and you would see that it looks just like the regular passenger windows when that's in there. And it was a complex thing, and of course, as soon as the MAX there, Boeing's getting some bummer advertisement again on this. So anyway, can't happen on the MAX. Okay. I repeated that up there. And then this person who was going to Hawaii, that prompted them to come back and say, well, if I was on an airplane, can it survive, something like that and fly the rest of the way to Hawaii, all that. And in detail, then can it fly at 10,000 feet? Because she picked up on the 10,000 feet somewhere, but that is a key altitude, because we descend to that if we lose pressurization. And then so talk about that one, Eric, a little bit from your experience flying over water.
So I'll answer number 3 first, which we kind of already talked about. Would we recommend not flying Southwest while they're investigating? Absolutely, positively not. They don't have any of this model of MAX, the -9. They only have the -8s. So it absolutely doesn't apply to them. The middle one, when an aircraft is dispatched over water, which we've reviewed ad nauseum here on an ETOPS dispatch, the plan is at the midpoint of the flight for the airplane to possibly have an engine failure or have a depressurization, and have to continue and go forward or turn around and go back. So when the airplane is flying such a trip, it's fueled in case of that contingency. So it's carrying enough gas to deal with that should it happen on an overwater flight.
And that's the same for if it's the Atlantic, Pacific, or whatever, right? So it's based on the worst possible scenario, which would be losing the thrust from an engine and losing cabin pressurization. And the reason it's worse when you go to low altitude because the fuel consumption is higher for a jet engine, jet airplane. So anyway,
So
okay.
Tracy has a question. What would have happened if someone was in those seats but strapped in?
Well, that's speculation right now. The good news is because if you think of the airplane as a balloon, and so if you know, and you may have seen this in a science experience, if I can take a balloon and that's barely inflated, and if I tie it off and I put it in the cabin of an airplane and I climb to altitude, as soon as I get to the top altitude in the cabin there, the balloon will fill up because the pressure outside of it is lower than what it was at sea level or wherever they took off from. So the airplane is like that as well. So the differential between so an airplane is like a balloon. And when you take off, the inside of the cabin is the same essentially as the pressure in the outside. And that's why you notice your ears all the time, right? So when you're climbing up, the air that's trapped in your middle ear is trying to get out. So it wants to equalize the pressure because it's greater inside your head than it is outside in the cabin. So the airplane itself wants to expand a little bit. So as the airplane climbs, now we don't, as a passenger, if you've ever been a passenger, we don't take the cabin altitude to the same as the outside altitude. So if we're cruising at 35,000 feet, we don't want you at 35,000 feet in the cabin because you're going to have to be in oxygen the whole time. So we pressurize the inside to keep you somewhere around 7,500 to 8,000 feet. And that's about 8 psi differential, I think, isn't it, Eric? Something like that. Okay. So if they had been at a higher altitude, and that happened, and of course everybody talked about the gust of air that went out there. I mean, that hole was dramatic enough as it is. So all the pressure is like popping a balloon. So all that pressure exhausted out that hole, and until it can equalize the pressure on the outside, it's like a horrendous wind going by there. Some of the things that Diane was telling me, 2 people lost their cell phones. The wind blew them out the gap there. And then there was a kid in the row behind or something like that. It actually took his shirt off and sucked it out. So this was about 14,000 feet when they experienced it. And that's about the time when the pressurization starts to get a little oomph and pressurize in the cabin. And so the momentum of the airplane, because those airplanes climb like a son of a gun, and they topped out at about just over 16,000 feet, and they went back down. Had they been at cruise altitude at 35,000 feet or something like that, it would have been more dramatic. And so nobody will ever know. We're just grateful. And the other thing that Diane pointed out was the airplane was essentially full, except for the people near that window there, or near where it blew out. So had there been somebody there, it could have been a lot more serious. It could have been like the lady that was killed years ago in the Southwest airplane where she got her torso got sucked out. So anyway,
Tracy, it's all guesswork, but the row of seats remained. They did not get sucked out. So it would have been dependent on how tightly they were fastened to the seats, I guess.
Yeah. So all we can do is just be thankful that we got the information, and the people responsible will make the changes. And of course, the first question that I get from people is, should I fly on a MAX 9? And I say, well, when they put them back in the air, you can bet that'll be the most scrutinized airplane out there, because that's the way it is. And there's some funny stories I won't bother going into them tonight, but pilots, when something happens to an airplane and it involves a control surface check or something like that, we'd have guys over checking the controls and the actuators that get hot. And they'd say, okay, guys, checking the flight controls once is enough. You don't have to do it 57 times. And so we all go into the overkill mode after that. And but it's like accidents, and I'm just grateful there was nobody hurt. No tragedies on this, because we have built safety of the airlines on the shoulders of some people that died in the course of learning some lessons that we needed to. But I always felt better when I entered the aviation world, it wasn't Orville and Wilbur's day, and now it's 50 years later, and we know more than we did then. So that's why it gets safer and safer and safer, despite things like this happening. I've said, as long as there are human beings involved in flying and building airplane stuff, there will be mistakes. What we try to do is catch them before they become consequential, or stop them completely there. So, okay.
I'd like to give a very short shout out here to school teachers.
Yeah. Yep.
And the door landed in the yard of a school teacher
Yeah.
who was A, smart enough to know what it is, and B, cared enough to return it, which matters a lot, rather than somebody who might have just left it on the porch and put a potted plant in it, assuming it didn't hit them. So thank you, school teachers, and thank you for turning in the door.
Yeah. And same with the people who found the cell phones, I guess. Somebody's grateful for that. And Diane was saying that they found the 2 cell phones that went out the window, and they both worked. So that'd be a good commercial for Apple there. Okay, so here's the meat of the matter. This is why you showed up here. So what does this have to do with you? Okay, well, it means, like everything else, you try to do your best to get over it, because it didn't happen to you, and it won't happen to you ever again, because they'll fix this, and it won't be. There'll be something else out there. But do you want to run the rest of your life waiting for a window to blow out, or for something else that you never thought about to happen? And I would suggest no. So, and then the other question is, likely something like this would happen 2.5 hours into the flight. That was the lady going to Hawaii. And I said no, because, and it wouldn't have been likely before, because it would have been a different airplane, and it won't be likely now because of what we learned from this. So it's like any other trigger. The fact that it happened becomes noise in your life, and you have to learn how to deal with the noise, not ignore it. You won't be able to ignore it. You just have to deal with it. Like any other trigger, it gets your attention and it won't let go. And so now you become attention disordered, and you've got to work on the things that we talk about to alleviate that frustration, that pain, and all that. We recommend keep working on your program and let the FAA and Boeing resolve this and do the things that they're supposed to do. It's better that it happened now and get it out in the open and at the altitude and everything that happened, so that nobody got hurt. And we'll just be thankful and grateful for that. Okay. So, what else? I can't think. Okay. So
Tracy had another question. It would be for Eric. So it would fly the rest of the way at 10,000 feet if depressurization happens on the way to Hawaii. So she basically wants to know, are you going to go all the way? Wherever you go, whether it's to Hawaii or a turn back, is it all going to be at 10,000 feet?
Yes.
Take it, Eric.
Right. Yes.
That's what, yeah. That's basically what we were saying, that there's plenty of fuel on board to go whichever direction you need to go at that time. So
well, the second rule is the equal time point, right, Eric? Right. Tell them, brief them on that.
So yeah, Tracy, there's going to be enough gas.
Yeah.
Now, not in my car if I'm driving somewhere, but
yeah.
But that's a different
story. So which way we go depends on another rule. Right?
Right.
It has nothing to do with the 10,000 feet. It just depends on whether we're past the equal time point. And if we're past it, we go to the destination. If we're not, we turn around and go to back to the West Coast in the case of Hawaii. So, okay.
And there's another question from Sandra Holgun. Would you fly Boeing or Airbus? And I'm going to answer yes.
Yeah, right. Wait, another
yes.
variation of that question is, hey, I'm flying this weekend, and how do I know that the airplane's safe? I said, if the pilots get on it, you can do it.
And
okay?
if we get on it too, because
right, and assuming the flight attendants will get on it, the pilots do.
Yeah.
And you might say, well, it wasn't safe this time. Yeah, but nobody knows. Okay, but everybody exercised the judgment that they're charged with, particularly the pilots and the flight attendants, to make sure that the airplane was safe and pre-flighted and all that. So getting on the airplane is not, it's just like you don't have to worry about fixing the airplane. It's not your job. And I don't mean to be cynical or sarcastic or anything, but that's the whole point. When you get in your car, if you get into the airplane with the same attitude most of us get in our car, you'll never be afraid to fly, because we just don't do the stuff that we should. We should probably be a lot more vigilant in driving our cars all the time. But we don't. If you're like me, you kind of just do it. And if you don't hear any clunking or see any obvious dinks in the car, you just keep driving the thing until it quits. Why? Because you know you can pull off the side of the road there. But yeah, so you don't, it's just not something you worry about. Okay, something you can worry about is what to do when you have residual or hanger-on type agony what am I saying? Anxiety. Okay. There's two ways that you look at therapy. One is top down, and that's normally identified with the higher function of the brain, the cerebral cortex, and you use things typically like CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. The other way is bottom up, because bottom up works on the limbic system part of the brain. And the limbic system doesn't take direction from anybody or anything. It operates just like it did before we had the cerebral cortex. It operates like a lizard. It doesn't look for patterns in the environment. It can't compute things. It can't predict the future. It just responds to instinct. And so for many of you, and I mean many of you, because I would say now we're talking about upwards of 75% of the people that we work with now are people who suffer from entrapment. We used to call it claustrophobia, but we learned another word, and it's much more relevant. And that is it has its roots in control. When I can't be in control, I start to get freaked out about things. And if it happens in an airplane, now I know that my options are further limited by the fact that I'm not going to be in a position where I could get off the airplane, even if they would let me off. So that often requires some bottom-up therapy. And EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. If you have done EMDR, put a little note in the comments there. I'd love to see if there's anybody out here that's done that. This is something that's been around since the late 80s. I personally used it in my own personal growth back in the early 90s. It's come a long way, but it's an amazing therapy in therapeutic intervention. And we have the capability now to do that remotely. I've been doing it for some time, but I didn't do it as much as I wish I had done now. Well, partly because when you're doing it remotely, until the video quality got up to where we could have the high quality exchange that we do now, it was a little bit more difficult. But now I've got a software program that allows me to do EMDR sessions with people right through Zoom over there. And in some ways, it's actually more advantageous to do it with the two screens like this than it would be even in the same room. There's to some degree fewer distractions. But the reason I mention this tonight is we are going to talk in great detail about EMDR on Thursday, a week from this Thursday, on the next monthly live coaching session. So if you haven't, I'll probably send out a reminder to people. Strongly consider joining us. If you don't do any others, consider doing this one. And as always, every live coaching session we do at least one custom guided visualization that you'll have to show for it. And we do respond to people who are there to get questions or answered to their personal situations and stuff like that. And I think it's the best thing that we offer right now is the monthly coaching. And if you don't know where to start, it's a great place to start, because you'll see people in various stages of working through their stuff, and overcoming fear flying is a process. Very rarely do we have somebody that has an instant aha and they're just off on the road, down the road without any follow-on issues. It really is something that you want to stay engaged with us in some way down the road and get the support that you need to really get over that on the long term, that is, at least. So join us for the EMDR. You will be, if you're on our list, you also, and I can't believe I didn't put the slide in here, but you're also going to be getting a notice or an invitation. If you're going to be in the Los Angeles area at any time during the on February 24th, we're going to do our next Clear for Takeoff 301 graduation flight. I'm gonna fly over to Burbank, possibly Eric and Diane as well, and we're gonna meet over there as we do at the Burbank Airport on Friday or on Saturday, February 24th, and we're gonna fly to Sacramento and back. That's gotten to be a really convenient leg. In Southwest prices it pretty well. In fact, they have a sale that started today. So when you get the notice, if you in any way think that you want to, you're gonna get the cheapest price that Southwest has right now to go to that for today, tomorrow, and on Thursday. So for today and the next 2 days, you're gonna have the cheapest fare, and it's under 100 for both legs. Okay, and then because of that, we're going to celebrate that. We're going to take another $200 off of the normal tuition so that you can go with us for $297 for the tuition, and then all you got to do is buy the tickets there. So when you get that, if you're interested at all, please consider that. And we do this on just about once or about 3 or 4 times a year for the LA area there, and inevitably we'll get to the point where we just did it, or we're in the last week and the prices on Southwest have gone up, and people say, "Hey, when are you going to fly out of LA again?" So tell everybody because this is it's something that we do on an infrequent basis somewhat, but we'd love to have you. It's the best thing going. You can ask Eric or Diane. There's nothing better than flying with a group of people. It's like we own the airplane, even though we're a small part of the component.
It's very rewarding for you and us.
Yeah.
And
we always
and it almost always happens that passengers around us, I mean, we're obviously in a group, and they kind of ask questions. Oh, what group is this? And by the time we go from Burbank to Sacramento and then on the flight back, we have a peanut gallery. We have a crowd kind of cheering for everyone. It's just
at least the people right around us, and if the flight attendants make announcements, oftentimes the pilots will do that. Now we got a whole cheering gallery out there, so it is fun, and some of the agony that many of you have been through, where you get to the airport and you're self-conscious about how many people can tell that you're freaked out or how much stress you're under. Doesn't happen when you come there. We know everybody. We will do the Thursday before the Saturday that we do that. We will do an online briefing, and we'll talk about the flight in detail. And then when we meet at the airport, pretty much people have made friends, and we have people in classes that stay connected. As Tracy Solis, she's one. And we have a lot of people who have done this, and they make friends with each other, and it lasts for a long time there. So consider that.
That with Sandra said, flying with a group in October made all the difference in her food. And Wendy Sprymoy said, one of the best things I've ever done. So there's all these personal comments that really help with everybody's understanding of how important this particular event is to fly.
And you can trust Sandra because she had not flown in forever, and we'll just say upwards of 60 years. We won't put the top, but she's the record holder so far for people that have gone through the class in terms of how long they have not flown. But Sandra had never flown, and it's really been fun getting to know her. So okay. Well, I don't have anything else unless you guys got
one
other comments.
Thing. Don in his comment said, it would be interesting to hear how pilots overcorrect the aircraft as they are approaching a landing in stormy or windy conditions like today in the Washington, D.C. area. There were news stories on that today in D.C. media on how planes going into Reagan or Dulles were having to steer the aircraft in a way to compensate for the strong winds. So
okay. So if you want to scare yourself, go on the YouTube and look for crosswind landings, and so there. We could say that that the possibility that you'll over control, but what you're really reacting to is you're reacting to Mother Nature not playing fair, really. So the winds, it's not just the fact that the winds are coming in from an angle, it's the fact that they're varying. So you may get a gust that goes up to 25 miles an hour, and then it drops off to 15 miles an hour, and that makes it challenging. It's where we get to do some of our best stuff, wouldn't you say, Eric?
Yeah.
And ironically, Yeah, I've gotten some of my best landings because when I know it's going to be a crosswind landing, and especially if it's gusty, my vigilance is higher. That's not to say that I fall asleep the rest of the time, but it's much higher than it is normally, and I get better landings. And to me, a better landing is when you can't tell that the wheels touch down. That's really cool.
Sure, we're
But
concentrating much harder.
yeah, yeah. So when you look at, I don't recommend looking on YouTube anyway. But if you do, just know that they're doing their stuff, and be very careful because there are a lot of animations on there, and the quality of the animation is so good that you would think it's a real airliner. It is not. There's a couple with the big Airbuses and 747s in there. There is no way that's a real airplane, and you got to look closely. There's a video on YouTube of a Russian fighter landing on a carrier, and it literally goes up vertical and then just kind of falls forward and touches down. There's no way that would happen in reality. And the only way you can tell is when you look real closely at the flight deck. There's no markings on it. It's just like it came right out of the factory. So be very careful when you go on there. And like we say for a lot of other stuff, send us the link if you're not too sure, and we'll give you our opinion as to whether it's legitimate and what's going on even if it is legitimate. So okay.
And on the word over control, the pilots are putting control inputs in to keep the airplane lined up with the runway, because Ron has pointed out many times, people are all testy. If they don't get to the gate, just slamming the airplane onto the airport isn't close enough. And so it's not over controlling, but it's putting in control inputs to keep the airplane lined up with the runway until you're on and can taxi.
Yeah, and that's really we're earning our money in when you're doing crosswind landings and it's gusty down there. So anyway, okay.
Ron, did you ever let a cruel streak out when you were flying with a first officer and the wind was 0? And I would let a snarky comment go about, man, we're in trouble now.
Yeah, right. Just because there was no adversity, right?
Good luck. I'm glad this is your leg.
Yeah, yeah. And my worst landings came after my best landings, right? Because you go back to being comfortable again. So yeah, a little bit of vigilance is always good for paying attention up there when you're landing the airplane. So anyway, thanks, Diane. Thanks, Eric. Thanks, Dieter, behind the scenes, wherever you are. Hope you're having a good time. And thanks to all of you for coming and listening to us every week. And we will be back next week for another episode of Fearless Flight Live. Thanks so much for joining us. We really appreciate you coming on board with us. Take care and have a great week.